Hey friends, welcome to the Next Best Thing podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Cline-Thomas. I'm here to help you live the life that you design instead of choosing a life you think you have to settle for. Let these conversations be your guide. Now, if you have been hanging out with us for a little bit, right? Especially if you've been hanging out with us all year. But if you just joined and you're just kind of milling about, why don't we just kind of make it a little bit official, right? Go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. It will ensure that you never miss another episode. We have new programming that's coming in the new year that I can't wait for you to hear. We're just going to keep rocking together. There's so much more to learn, so much more to do, so many more ways we can celebrate each other. And I just really want us to do this together. So let's commit and subscribe and tell a friend to tell a friend. That's really what it's all about. So this is the last episode of the year. It's just you and me together, chit-chatting. I said this on my social media. I may have said it on another episode too, but like I'm in full turn down mode. People are like going from party to party to party to party right now. Not me. No. I am in how can I be by myself mode? How can I have quiet by myself to really process what has been an absolutely incredible year? Like an absolutely incredible year. Quite frankly, you're lucky that I'm not recording this in a fleece muumuu with the blanket over my head. I actually just recorded an episode that will air next year. So that's the only reason why I am pulled together today, or else I would have just done it as is, because that's just how I'm feeling right now. So I'm knee deep in my annual process of really reflecting on this year. When we started this year, if you remember, go back, the word for the year was intention. That was the word for the year. And it wasn't cute. I was for real. That is how I'm going to move this year, is with intention. And what that meant to me was that I was going to do things that made sense. That I wanted to kind of put out there, that the things that I wanted to do, I wanted it to be aligned. And there is something really powerful when you say the thing, that what you attract is the very thing that you need and that you want even more than what you need. So I am like going through this process. So my professor, Dr. Carrie Ann Rockamore, who was the second episode on this podcast, I use her method, and her method really kind of breaks down how to kind of process your year. So first you start saying, well, what happened, right? So you gather all the data of what happened. So for me, it's like, what jobs did I do? When did I see my family? When did I hang out? Like, when did I travel? What did I do? And one of the things that she said to do is, like, if you don't remember, is to look in your phone and scroll through your phone, because you naturally captured the moments there, and it can help jog your memory. So after I do that kind of assessment of like what happened, which is kind of where I am right now, just really assessing what happened, then I go into like, all right, from what happened, what did I love? What didn't I love? What did I learn from the experiences that I had? And then write that down. And then I go into, what do I want? Not just for like the next year, but what do I really want? So that kind of helps me understand, okay, what do I want to continue? What do I need to stop? Where are there gaps where I want something that I have yet to get? It's not even an achievement thing, but the thing that I just want, this is what I want my life to look like. Is there a gap? Then I look at, okay, what habits are necessary? Like, how do I get those things? Whether it's a continuation of the thing. So what did I do to put myself in a position for this thing to happen? Or if it's something new that I want, what do I need to do to get it? And then break that down further to what habits are necessary to put me in the position where this thing can happen. Like, I talk to people sometimes and it's just like, I want $1 million. And it's like, all right, so break down what $1 million is every month. okay, and break that down to like, okay, what services do you provide? And how much money would you have to bring in? How many customers do you have to bring in? What does their average spend have to be? Like anybody can see anything. You know, we're going to have 1,000 email addresses. But if you haven't put in like how, then it doesn't really matter. Like it's just not a real thing. And so I always want to make it a real thing, but I don't like go back to it constantly, although I might for 2025, just because I have too much kind of going on. But I can say that like so much, I'm trying to find my notebook from last year. I thought it was one notebook. I was like looking for it today. But like so much of what I wanted in terms of like the values, one of the things that I've been grappling with this year is I left traditional news. So if you're new here, I was a news reporter, an anchor for more than 15 years. My last job was here in New York City, where I live. And before my 40th birthday, I blew up my whole life. And then I launched into entrepreneurship, which really was like a side hustle plus a full-time job that I treated as a client for 1 year. And then that was 2002 to 2003, right? And then in August of 2003, I left that full-time job that I had. I had clients on the side the entire time, but I left that full-time job to really just sink my teeth into entrepreneurship and like figure it out, because I felt like the job was taking away from what I truly wanted to do, which was entrepreneurship. And then, so this is my first full year of entrepreneurship. And what entrepreneurship just means to me is that it was a hypothesis of, can you monetize your idea and can it be enough to sustain yourself? That was like the goal in terms of, can you even do this? Like, is this a real thing for you? I know it's a real thing for other people, but could this be a real thing for you? Could you figure this out this year to make enough money? Because the statistics always say like, entrepreneurship is, especially women entrepreneurship, is but women entrepreneurs and Black women entrepreneurs, it's always, you're not making any money. What is it? I think it's like $55,000 is what the average female entrepreneur is making. And I was like, well, that's not going to work in New York City. And thankfully, I am not a part of that group. I have figured it out in terms of, yes, answering that fundamental question, can I monetize my expertise in a way that's sustainable for my lifestyle? Yes. Do I need to make more? Do I want to make more? Absolutely. So I don't really talk a whole lot about what I do for work here. So in going through all the people that I worked with this year. Some of my clients included Microsoft, that I do media training with, global tech executives, The Atlantic Magazine. I produce their live journalism events. I did 4 of them, including their flagship Atlantic Festival, producing events on some big stages for the Atlantic Festival. I've partnered with Watering Hole Media, which is owned by Ashley Allison, who is the truth teller on CNN. Okay. She's a political strategist and commentator on CNN. And she started a media company. And so I produced 2 of her shows. One is called Wait a Minute. It is a show, it's like a talk show. That is the intersection of Black women, politics, and culture. The other one is called The Pushback. It's still kind of in beta phase right now, where we just published a few episodes, but it is meant to specifically address the misinformation and disinformation that's out there on the internet. So we have our hosts kind of in a pithy, just like really smart way addressing the news of the week, with the intent of addressing the misinformation and disinformation out there. So I do that. I worked with NABJ to produce the conversation with Donald Trump. I don't even like to say I produced it. Like that was my role, but didn't nobody listen to me because it did nobody listen to me. We're just going to leave it at that. One day I might actually tell you what happened behind the scenes. So I like to say I was behind the scenes because I was very much behind the scenes. It was like the most chaotic thing I did this year. And also I produced the conversation with Vice President Kamala Harris that NABJ did. And I also executive produced for a month, pinch hit for Amanda Seals's show, her radio show. So those are just some of the things that I did this year. I did some other stuff too. I traveled a lot. I traveled to the Bahamas, to Atlanta, Jamaica twice, Idaho, Austin, LA twice, Chicago twice, Barcelona, and then I went home like 6 times. Okay. Also, this year, pretty much, I also started a second business. See, this is what happens when you're naive, right? Like this, I'm happy I did this, but it also happens because when you don't know what the hell you're doing and you just navigating out here and you just closing your eyes and just tapping up, this is what happens. So I basically started a second business really called The Rewrite. It is a community of journalists and storytellers looking to reassess, reimagine, and reinvent their careers in the face of the instability in the industry. And so what I do is provide, webinars and a course, and we also have like a summit as well to provide folks with information. I partnered with experts to do this. So I'm not like the main teacher at all. I partner with experts and they help guide our community through this transition, through the reality of the collapse in the media industry right now. And so we put it out there January 9th of this year. And, of course, our friends signed up first. And now we have hundreds and hundreds of people signed up. So kind of crazy. And saying it out loud even sounds crazier, which is why I'm like, man, I'm tired because there is a lot that's been going on. And I'm just in the beginning processes of like assessing what my year was. And here are just some of the things that I wanted to share that I'm reflecting on. First is just because things may be slow or quiet doesn't mean that movement isn't happening. Most of what I mentioned happened between the last week of March and right now. So that means the first 10 weeks of the year were almost completely radio silent. And I didn't just sit there and twiddle my thumbs and be like, ooh, summon Jesus off the throne. I got to work. So I got to work on myself because I was like, okay, there's clearly something I need to learn. There's a blind spot there. And so I took classes. I talk about Luminary a lot here. It's more than my co-working community. It is my community that has helped me, that's changed the game, quite frankly, in my process. And so I took classes there. I've met wonderful people who are coaches there, and I've taken their classes. I was going to events. I was meeting with people one-on-one. I was, having meetings with people, pitching myself. None of those pitch meetings worked, P.S., but they were good meetings to have anyway. And I was also trying to develop habits and, just developing the habits to put myself in an ecosystem where great things could happen. And so that leads me to the second thing, is that you have to share your story. So I was still doing this podcast. Yes, on top of all of that, I was doing this podcast. And because I share the podcast That was first how I started really getting out on social media, was sharing clips from this podcast. But from there, it has morphed into me talking about my story and sharing my thought leadership and really considering myself as a thought leader in specific areas. And doing that is how I got the Amanda Seales job. So let me tell you, I met this guy. His name is Colby Cole. Deep history in hip hop. Like, he is part of hip hop history, and he's very high up at Urban One. And I met him years ago when I lived in Philly. Like, literally, he interviewed. Like, my station was a co-sponsor with Urban One and maybe some other people of this event in the convention center. And so they were just like, assigned reporters times when they had to go in. And then I had to go interview with him just on the radio. But it was like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. He liked me. We just had a great conversation. He lives in Maryland. I'm from Maryland. And so we connected there. So we were just on Instagram. And the executive producer of Amanda Seales' show had to be out for an extended time. And so he needed somebody to just fill in for a month. That was it. And he told me, he goes, "You were the first person I thought about." He was like, "It was God. You were the first person I thought about. And the first thing I did was I went to your Instagram to see what you were up to. And I thought it was really interesting that you left this high profile job. And, I just wanted to learn more. And I thought you would be really perfect for this opportunity." So I did it for a month. Have I ever executive produced a nationally syndicated radio show? No. No, I had not. But it was a great learning process. We were doing news, but in a fun way. It was just a really good learning process. The same thing happened with this organization called CNTV. So it was started by journalists, and they provide broadcast quality video to conventions and associations for conferences and things of that nature. And so a man who I also met in Philly, but I met him for maybe 3.5 minutes, right? Like, we've probably spoke for 3.5 minutes, but I'm very active on LinkedIn. And he saw one of my posts on LinkedIn, and he kept me in mind for something. So basically something opened up, and he was like, "I think you would be great for this thing." We didn't know each other like that. Like, both of these relationships were not cultivated and fostered over time. We just had kind of a moment where we spoke, where we met and followed each other and didn't really keep up. But I was telling my story. They were seeing, they weren't engaging with my content. They were just seeing it. And so when something happened, I was top of mind. Say all this to say that you can't keep your story to yourself. There are multiple reasons why. One, people want to work with people who have stuff going on, with them. And so you got to tell people that you got stuff going on, just in terms of cultivating interest in what you have to offer, right? But the other reason why I do this podcast is because, and this is what I tell every guest that comes on the podcast, is your story could be somebody else's blueprint. So your struggles, your transparency, the things that you figured out, somebody else can implement in their lives, so they don't have to have the same hiccups and obstacles, and they can take that baton and run even further. I think that part's even more important. But also, remember that hypothesis I was talking about? Can I sustain myself being 100% on my own? Like, that is part of the equation. And I know it's something that, a lot of people are like, "Well, I don't really like talking online. Okay. I really like making money. I really like getting checks. And if this is how I have to get a check to just, talk my talk online, hello, yappity yap, yap, yap. I'm going to be talking." Which leads me to something I kind of referenced earlier. 3 is, just because you've never done it before doesn't mean you don't know how to do it. So other than the Atlantic job, which I had done since 2022, everything else, but when I did it in 2022, I had never done it before. Everything that I'm doing at one point within the last 2.5 years, I had never done it before. I was not a full-fledged producer. I had ideas. I helped coordinate logistics, but I wasn't a full-fledged producer before. And now I produce a lot Now I am a producer. I feel very comfortable saying I am a producer. I produced 100, about over 100, more than 100 episodes for the cable show that I worked on when I first got out. Plus, I have these YouTube series that I'm producing right now. I'm producing live events. I am a producer, but I didn't start as one. I transferred skills, media training. I had done that a little bit before, but not in such a structured way, and certainly not with executives that are this high up and global executives. So I train people in other countries. And so there are like cultural nuances that I've learned and things of that nature, but that didn't mean I couldn't do it. That didn't mean what I had to share wasn't valuable. Sometimes it's tiring to transfer a skill. Sometimes I'm just like, can I just write a voci? And the people on TV know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's like, I could write that joker in my sleep. Basically, I was, doing what I used to do every single day. I don't do that anymore. Everything I'm adapting, I'm stretching, I'm learning, I'm applying. If this is true over here, maybe it'll be true over here. Um, it's a constant learning, and it can be exhausting, but it's a stretching that's so necessary. So don't disqualify yourself because you have not done the thing one to one. Like, can you learn? If you're listening to this and you like to learn, so broaden your scope and your perspective about the value you can add in industries that might not be the exact industry that you're in terms of being open to new opportunities. Okay, fourth, I talked about this a lot, that I got sick this year, and I have not been that sick in a really long time. It was pretty awful. I'm fine now, but it's because I was doing the most. And so I need to put quiet time on my calendar, just like I do meetings. And I have to protect it at all costs. So like, it's creating systems. It's really about creating systems. And this year did feel chaotic. I had told myself this is a throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, but it's also transparently, it's unsustainable. I cannot operate next year the way I operated this year. I can have the same success and more. I believe I'm figuring out how, but I believe I can have the same success and more. And the difference will be systems and my friend Faith, my friend Nancy, who get on me all the time, tell me to sit down. I've gotten help. So I have a virtual assistant now, and I have an editor for the podcast now. I was doing everything myself, and that was not smart. So just buying my time back. So I need to go sit down somewhere. But what it is not, or some people are like, just go sit down. Like, I live in New York City. It is very expensive to live here. I don't get a paycheck every 2 weeks. And I actually like what I do. So it's not a burden. Like, it's very different. Work does not burden me anymore. I did not dread one day of this year. I did not wake up and be like, oh my God. I mean, if I woke up and was like, oh my God, it's because it was like 4 a.m. and I had to go catch a flight. But I was happy about where I was going. I was happy about what I was going to be doing. It was an adventure. Like, I have not dreaded my life. I have not, for the most part, dreaded who I'm working with. I've been tired, but I haven't had dread. I don't feel like I have to protect myself. Stephanie Perry said this during her interview. And when she said it, I was not in the space of experiencing it, but now I know what she's talking about. She's like, I don't have to protect myself from the people that I'm around every single day, something to that effect. And I'm not looking over my shoulder. I'm not having to say the right things or worry about what I'm saying and, walk on eggshell. I don't do that. And that has just regulated my nervous system in a way. And sometimes I even had a meeting. I'm not going to tell you what I said in this meeting, but I even had a meeting where I am so, because once you can make money on your own, it really does kind of give you a different swag that, like, the gap is just finding the money. Like it's a puzzle. Like I think of entrepreneurship like a puzzle. Like that's how my brain works. I am just one step away from like something amazing happening. I don't feel like it's a far away thing. But once you've been able to do this and sustain yourself in this way, when opportunities come, you're not just like, yes, I'm just going to take anything. So you are interviewing people the way that they are interviewing you. And I kind of don't really do a whole lot of interviews because everything that I've gotten has come from a friend. And so I've been highly recommended for things, and then we have conversations, and the conversations are to determine a fit both ways. And I had a situation where there was a conversation that got kind of interesting, and I just was like, "Oh, I haven't had a conversation." It was like almost like an interview, and I was kind of thrown off because I was just like, I don't know, this is weird, because I hadn't done it in so long. But I say all that to say that when you can, just because you haven't done it before, um, you can do it. You can really, really do it. And I don't think that's even what I was saying. I need to put quiet time on my calendar. Yes. And then you just have to carve out the time. I have to carve out the time on my calendar. But like, I can't just go radio silent. I'm not going to have a day where I don't do anything, like nothing regarding work. Like I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to watch a YouTube video. Like everything is geared towards business now, learning about business, doing business, learning about business. And I like it. I love it. It's so fun to me. So my frame of reference for work is different than it has ever been. 5, entrepreneurship is lonely. And I thought when people would say that, that means that they're not around a lot of people. And I was like, well, I'm around a lot of people. Like I've got this amazing co-working space. I have these friends. I'm like meeting people pretty much every week and networking. And we call it networking, but it's like they're my friends. Like I really like them. And so we're like catching up every single week, virtual calls. I'm being introduced to people. Like it's just great, right? People have been so generous. But that's not just what they're talking about. The lonely part that I experienced, it really hit me in the summer. I had to work through this, is that you have to make every single, as a solopreneur, you're making every single decision. And there's so much on the line. You have a course and you've told people who are the experts that are coming to your course, you got to pay them, whether the course makes the money to pay them or not. You know what I mean? Like you're on the hook for real dollars. You know, when I send out these emails, I'm paying for them. I have sent out more than 10,000 emails, like more than 10,000 emails. And so when factoring in how many people I'm sending it to, multiply that by the weeks. That's how. But like, I'm paying for that. The system that does this is not just Gmail. I have a system that does this. I got to pay for that. When we have a webinar, the system that does that, I got to pay for that too. I got to pay for it. When I'm going to this event, or I got to pay for it. So you're making decisions. And especially when you're working with like limited resources and you're trying to maximize impact, it can get, it's a lot. It's a really, really, really a lot. So it just made me look at especially small businesses totally differently. So if you guys are interfacing with small businesses, one, give them some grace and some slack, because this is so incredibly difficult. And also like do what you say you're going to do when you're working with a small business. Just be transparent and do what you say you're going to do. It is so incredibly hard, and you're paying a lot of money to try to meet your tribe, to try to meet your ideal client. And it costs money. It costs money. But what has come out of this whole experience are so many new friends. I made so many friends this year, and being grown and not having a workplace, and just to be kind of out here in the wind, making such good friends. Went to Idaho, a conference in Idaho, and met my girl Nady there. And we talk every month. We have like designated like 2 hours to talk every single month. We call each other business besties. Same with Ramala. Shout out to Ramala. We talk every Sunday, and she's my business accountability partner. And we met at an event with Rachel Rogers, Money Church. And Rachel said, "Turn to your neighbor." And I was like, "Wait, I think I know you." I had seen her before. We had a mutual friend, and we exchanged numbers. And she's like, "I would like an accountability partner." I said, "I would too." And then, ever since, we've been rocking it out on Sundays of just downloading, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what we trying to do, and giving each other feedback on that. So there's that. Last thing, 6, be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. You might fool around and get what you want. You might just get it. Because when I tell you this chaos, I know from the outside looking in, it looks like chaos, but this is the chaos that I hope for. This is the chaos that I dreamed about. And I have to remind myself of that when I'm like, girl, you are choosing the hardest way possible. But this is what I hope for. This is how my brain works. I am stimulated every day. Before, I was like operating on 35%. Like I had so much more to give. I wanted to have deeper conversations, more complex conversations with nuance. And that's exactly what I get to do now. When I was trying to look for my notebook with my 2024 goals so I could compare, I found my notebook with my 2023 goals. And then I found one with my 2022 goals. And I've been doing this even when I was in news. I would always take the last week and really just think about. But when I would think about it, like when I was in news, it would be like, oh, I got to change everything. Like this just don't work. I got to change everything. And it kind of came with a heaviness. But this year, it is coming with a celebration for once of like, girl, look at what you did. Look at how you spent your year. Like, and I also, another thing that's really interesting is that I remember the year. I mean, when I tell you there are moments where I just will black out. Like I just disassociate. I don't even remember that. Because I was just having no fun and just like, ugh. And I would just straight up disassociate. There are blank moments that I just don't even remember. This year, I remember this year. I remember how I felt. I remember what I wore. I remember who I met. I laughed a lot. I was looking at, I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements now about my transition. That's something that I did more of this year. And I've broken it down, a structured kind of speech about it. And one of the things I talk about is really reassessing my values and how to transition. I had to absolutely, like, without judgment and with full blown radical honesty, consider what my values are. And my values were to hang out with my parents in particular, family in general, parents in particular, to travel, to put myself on the path to make generational wealth. Those were my top 3 things. There were some other things I wanted, but those were my top 3 things. And I have to check myself, especially when I'm in super duper grind mode, that I'm not just taking the stress of my old life and bringing it into my new life. Because I was like, I did not leave that. It wasn't a good check, but it was still a check. I didn't leave that check to then run myself into the ground. I always have to like remind myself of that, but it's so different. So when I was going back and I was looking through my calendar of like, when did I go home? What was I able to celebrate? And this year I was able to be like, when I go home, I'm like home for like a week and I'm just chilling, right? Like I'm just chilling with my parents. I'm working while I'm there. So I'm working. I wake up early and I'm working. But in the evening I can sit and have dinner with my parents and hang out and see some friends sometimes, And so the friends that I've been able to rekindle relationships with too is more this year than ever before. I usually have my straight core group of mainly college friends, but now it's just like some college friends who I haven't seen in forever. I've seen this year, and friends from elementary school. Like, it's just incredible. It's incredible. And there's so many moments that I've had an experience, and I'm like, last night. So I went to Luminary co-working space and community, and one of my friends there, Aaliyah, who's a stylist, had a clothing swap. I didn't know what this was. I was really just going to like support Aaliyah, and I forgot my clothes that I was going to donate to it, but that's neither here nor there. And I ended up having the best time. It was so fun. And I'm walking out the door and I'm like, man, that was so fun. And before that, my friend Chris, he came over and we chatted. He went to Boston College as well, but he's a lot younger. And we caught up. Like, it was so great. And so I'm talking for very long. I'm looking at the time. Every time I do a solo episode, I'm like, I'm just going to keep it cute and short, and that just never happens because I get carried on. I'm gonna wrap this up right now. I'm just so grateful. I hope that when you look back over your year, that you can be really proud of what you have muscled through, what you have figured out. It doesn't have to be 5 things, it could be just one thing. I hope you're radically honest about the areas where you need growth. I need to get in the gym, full stop, period. It's full stop. I have a great diet now. I need to now get in the gym. It's not enough. I need to sit down sometimes. Like, I've talked to you about the things that like were kind of difficult that I need to make adjustments for. That the life that I lived this year, as great and wonderful as it is also unsustainable. And I need to create systems because I can't do this again next year in this specific way. It is just completely unsustainable. It is frenetic, and it can be chaotic, and it can go off the rails. And so I can't do that again. I know better, I do better. So this is not a time of year to flog yourself of what you shoulda, coulda, would have done. This is a time of year to say, did you do the best you can with what you got? In your Mariah Carey voice. Did you? And if the answer was no, why? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Because it's not a lack of desire, it's fear, right? What are you afraid of? And if there's the gap, because we all got gaps, right? Then join us next year to get more nuggets, more insight on sustainable, relatable, tangible ways to make things 1% better. I mean, I think that if you're committed to that, you will be so much further along because it's just the little 1%, 1%, 1%, 1%. I always tell the rewrite community, I did not make a plan when I need a plan. I really started my rewrite 10 years before I made the leap. 10, like no exaggeration, 10 years before I made the leap. So, and I did little things over time, and that has facilitated this type of transition. I was able to meet the Philly radio executive and make an impression because I had done the work before. I had a mindset. I was open, right? Like, so I have the energy to where things can, where I'm a good steward. I'm a good steward of the blessings because I have the discipline to do right by them. And what you can't do in the physical, like, I don't know what your faith tradition is, but God can do the rest. I'm always like, my relationship with God is not like a whole, you know, Father God, who is the head of my life. I don't do the Christianese. But it is all right, God, I'm doing all that I can. I'm trying to you don't need it from me, but I'm trying to demonstrate that I see this as a gift. Even on hard days, I see this as a gift. That's why I do the Friday wins, because it keeps me in gratitude. It keeps me in joy. It keeps me it doesn't allow me to take stuff for granted. It doesn't have to be this way for me because it's not this way for so many other people. Look, I'm showing up, and I'm showing up in my best, and I'm showing up not to meet the standard in front of me. I'm showing up to meet your standard, um, based on what I know I can do, right? Um, minimize me. And even with this podcast, it's not even about me. I just use myself as an example of like Hot Mess Express. So like when you're a Hot Mess Express, like we in the same boat. It's not a holier than thou situation. But I just really want to say, like, don't underestimate in your calculations what God can do in your life, how God can serve your biggest dreams. You just need to have the will. You just need to have the courage to dream it in the first place. If it's in your gut, you have all the elements for it to be fulfilled. You can't mess it up. You can't mess it up. You just have to follow the crumbs and understand that culture will do everything possible to keep you from doing it. The messaging is not for you to succeed. The messaging is to keep yourself small. You have to actively cultivate an environment from what you listen to, from what you watch, from who you're around. Even if those are your ace boons, if your ace boons talking crazy all the time and are in scarcity, you can't be abundant in a scarce place. You got to move to where you have room for abundance to come to you. And abundance doesn't come like you can't, you have to first think of it as possible before it comes to you. My hypothesis, I was like, I'm going to get this done by any means possible. And guess what? I did not have to. I'm trying to think of everything I did this year. I applied to none of it. I applied. Oh my God. I applied to nothing this year. I like had read, I tried to. I didn't get any of those things. Everything came to me. An Instagram DM, a LinkedIn message. For Ashley, I met her on a boat in the middle of the Bahamas. We were dancing because D-Nice was spinning, right? And we were doing our little two-step and stayed in touch. And then she was like, I'd like to have a conversation with you. Microsoft was through a friend who put my name up, and I had a conversation, and she was like, we'd like to have you on. I've not applied to anything. It just came, but I have been working for it. I feel like it's an accumulation of not 2 years. I feel like it's been an accumulation of 20. So I think if you put in the work, it will just meet you. It's just a matter of when. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And if you move like it's a matter of when, it could be that next door. It could be that next phone call, but just to stay open for it. I've seen it in my life, but I've also seen it in other people's lives. And people, the blessing of this platform, the blessing of the work I do with the rewrite is that people tell me, like, I see people winning. Like, it works. So I can be confident that it works because I actually see other people winning. When we're saying, okay, this is how you do it. And then here goes somebody who's been looking for a job for 6 months, and they finally something shakes out because they changed their approach. Small tweaks, change their approach, open them up to new opportunities. And I'm grateful to be a conduit because I think these are the stories that I need to tell. I had to tell the murder story and the, back in when I was in Macon, I had to tell those, piddly stories about nothing. I had to tell those stories so I could prepare myself and have the gravitas to tell this story of how to get from where you are to where you want to be, and that I could be responsible enough for it. I could be mature enough for it. And like God could trust me with, with everything that comes with it, because we have more than 400 people in that rewrite community. And every day I wake up and I think about the 400 plus people, and that they're in transition and they are part of my responsibility now. And I have the capacity to carry that weight. In fact, carrying that weight is such an honor and it's such a privilege. And for the people who listen and watch this podcast, I get your emails where it's just like, I have done this because I listened to this. And that means everything. And so I'm just grateful that God trusts me with you, with your ears, with your mind, with your heart, like that, with your eyes, like that God trusts me. And so I think the question in going into 2025 is, what will you let God trust you with? What will you let God trust you with? You're capable. You're capable. You can do anything. But will you allow it? Will you step out of your own way and allow it? So I just want to wrap up by saying, I'm proud of you. You showed up this year. You showed up. You showed up for yourself. You voted for yourself. We did some hard things together. Bravo. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Happy Kwanzaa. Feliz Navidad. We did it. So, programming note. The podcast, we're done for this year because you heard everything I've done, right? I'm going to bed. So we're going to come back, check the social media, Next Best Thing pod or podcast. Oh my gosh, I should know this off the top of my head. I'm on it 5 million times a day. So check the Instagram page. Next Best Thing pod. Next Best Thing pod. And I'll tell you when we're coming back, it's looking like middle of January. And then when we come back next year, there'll be changes, and we'll talk about it at the beginning of the year. But best wishes for the end of the year. We're still doing our Friday wins on Instagram, on Instagram on Fridays. And share, comment. We'll still be doing that through the holidays and stuff like that. We just won't have episodes for a month. Okay. It's been real. Thank you for everything. And I will see you in the new year. Thanks for listening to The Next Best Thing with Andrea Cline-Thomas, a Mountain Court Media production. The music was written, recorded, and produced by Gavin Casey, also known as Dark Purple. Now, if you like what you heard, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and write a comment on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to share it with friends. I hope this episode helps you on your journey. See you next time.